Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a story that's, well, it's as dramatic as it is heartbreaking, really. A true testament to the power and maybe the peril of public anger when it just reaches that boiling point. We're talking about Nepal, where in early September 2025, the country witnessed this explosion of unrest. It sent shockwaves across the globe, frankly, and forced the world to sit up and pay attention.
Yeah, it was impossible to ignore.
Imagine, if you will, the sheer chaos. You've got a prime minister forced to resign under just immense public pressure.
Unbelievable pressure.
Picture the private residences of really powerful figures. We're talking the prime minister, even the president, literally engulfed in flames. They're symbols of authority, just burning.
Quite literally burning, yeah.
And then the parliament complex itself, the heart of the nation's governance, also catching fire.
Right in the capital.
And in a scene that almost defies belief, we saw reports, videos even, of the finance minister being chased down the streets, beaten with shoes by an angry crowd. Just a visceral display of contempt.
Is raw anger, that.
And to underscore the sheer brutal intensity of this situation, there was even the tragic death of the former prime minister's wife when their house was set ablaze. It's a truly gut-wrenching, almost apocalyptic series of events that just unfolded with terrifying speed.
It really was. Horrific.
So for you listening, the central, intriguing question quickly becomes, what on earth led to this level of anger and chaos in Nepal? Was it, as some initial international media reports sort of fleetingly suggested, simply about a social media ban? Could something so seemingly modern be the sole fuse for such ancient raw rage?
Yeah, and that's truly critical to understand here. While the social media ban was absolutely a very significant, very visible trigger, it was far from the only reason, not even the deepest reason, I'd argue. If we connect this to the broader picture, Nepal's recent history, its socioeconomic struggles, it becomes immediately clear that there were multiple, complex, and really deeply entrenched factors at play.
Right.
They converged over time to create this incredibly volatile situation. It wasn't just a spark. It was more like a powder keg waiting for one.
That truly highlights the core tension, doesn't it? When the government's actions seem to contradict its stated intentions, or maybe when seemingly small acts just reveal much larger cracks in the system.
Precisely. And that perception gap is often where the trouble starts.
And that's exactly what we're aiming to do today. We're not just skimming the surface here. We're going to meticulously unpack the various layers of frustration, the deep-seated resentment, and the systemic issues that all converge to create the dramatic events of early September 2025.
Yeah, get beneath the headlines.
Exactly. This deep dive will guide you through the precise timeline of angst, the immediate catalysts, and then, crucially, the underlying societal and political grievances. By the end of this, you'll have a full, nuanced picture of what happened, and maybe more importantly, why it happened, equipping you with a comprehensive understanding of how a nation can reach such a dramatic tipping point. So let's begin our journey by looking at that very first spark, the moment the powder keg ignited. Let's try and immerse ourselves in the scene. It's September 8th, 2025, in Kathmandu. Picture this. Thousands upon thousands of people flooding the streets.
Huge numbers.
And the overwhelming majority of them, young individuals. We're talking roughly 20 to 25 years old. This was undeniably Nepal's Gen Z taking to the streets, a demographic often dismissed, maybe overlooked, now demanding to be heard.
Yeah, a generation finding its voice forcefully.
You could see some still in their school and college uniforms. That's a stark visual representation, isn't it? Just how young this movement was and how deeply it cut across the youth demographic.
It really is striking. It wasn't just university students, it was younger people too.
It wasn't just a handful. It was a massive outpouring of youthful energy, idealism, and, profound discontent.
Right.
The air must have been thick with a mix of anticipation and just simmering anger.
Yeah.
A generation collectively rising up.
And this initial protest, it had a very specific origin and intent, which is important for understanding the government's reaction that followed.
Okay, tell us about that.
It was organized by an NGO called Hami Nepal.
Hami Nepal.
Yeah, which translates to We Are Nepal, a name that itself speaks volumes, right?
Sure.
About collective identity, demanding national unity. Their plan was to march from the Medagar Mandala Monument, which is a hugely symbolic landmark in Kathmandu, often a gathering point for protests, calls for justice.
Right, I know the place.
Directly towards the parliament complex. Now, it's crucial to emphasize, this was conceived and organized as a nearly non-violent and peaceful march. That was the stated intention.
So Peaceful intent initially.
Yes. The root, the gathering point, the organizers, it all pointed to a measured, albeit passionate, demonstration. They intended to express grievances through established, forceful means. The idea was to deliver a message, not to, kick off a revolution.
But the government's response was anything but measured or peaceful, was it?
No, not at all. It was swift, harsh, and decisive. And it immediately escalated the situation.
How so?
Almost immediately, police forces were deployed en masse to intercept these predominantly young, peaceful protesters. They formed a human and vehicular blockade, effectively blocking their intended path to Parliament.
So straightaway, confrontation.
A very immediate show of force. Even before any major incident had occurred, it signaled a clear intent from the authorities. Dissent wouldn't be tolerated.
Okay. And what methods did they use? Just blocking the way?
Well, it quickly went beyond just forming a barrier. They came equipped for aggressive crowd dispersal. We saw water cannons brought out, and not just a light spray, deployed with real force against this young crowd.
Right.
Then came the tear gas, filling the air, stinging eyes and throats, making it hard to breathe, just turning the act of breathing into a struggle.
Awful.
And most disturbingly, rubber bullets were fired into the crowd. Now, these are intended to injure and deter, but they often cause severe harm, especially at close range or if they hit vulnerable areas.
But they're not harmless.
Definitely not. This aggressive and immediate deployment inevitably led to violent clashes between the authorities and the protesters. The initial peaceful intent from the protesters' side, it just began to break down under the weight of this forceful government intervention.
Understandable.
It wasn't long before the situation transformed from a structured march into a chaotic and increasingly desperate confrontation. It really ignited the first flames of that broader resentment.
What happened next is, well, truly harrowing. A turning point that shocked the nation and the world, elevating the protest from a local incident into a full-blown national crisis.
Yeah, this is where things took an incredibly dark turn.
Despite the police's overwhelming efforts to suppress them, some protesters, fueled by desperation, maybe outrage, sheer determination. Perhaps they managed to breach those initial lines and actually enter the Parliament complex itself.
A hugely symbolic act.
A critical moment, right. A line crossed that seemingly pushed the authorities to an unthinkable extreme.
What happened next? It really transcended typical crowd control measures. It shocked the entire nation, and I think it left a wound that will be very difficult to heal.
Go on.
The police's response was no longer about dispersing a crowd. The source material is clear. They openly fired at the protesters with live bullets.
Live bullets, not rubber bullets.
Live bullets, real bullets. This wasn't a mistake, a stray shot, or an accident. The sources emphasize real bullets, not rubber bullets, used directly against largely unarmed civilians.
My God. The consequences.
Devastating and immediate. At least 19 protesters were killed. More than 400 people injured.
19 killed.
And the particularly harrowing detail, the one that really sears into the national consciousness, is that among the dead was a 12-year-old child.
A 12-year-old?
It's a clear indication of the indiscriminate, the lethal force that was used. This brutal, disproportionate use of live ammunition by the government against its own citizens, many of them so young, it served as a profound and horrifying catalyst.
It didn't suppress the protests then?
Quite the opposite. It electrified public sentiment. It dramatically increased the outrage, the participation. This moment solidified in the public mind the government as an oppressor, not a protector, as a point of no return for many.
And I imagine the news of this brutality just spread like wildfire across the country.
Instantly. Social media, despite earlier attempts to control it, still found ways. People used VPNs, word of mouth. The horrifying images and stories got out.
So the immediate aftermath was
What?
even bigger protests?
An even greater outpouring of anger and solidarity, yes. Citizens hearing about the senseless killings, the severe injuries, especially children, they just poured into the streets in unprecedented numbers.
Wow.
The number of protesters swelled rapidly, filling the roads of Kathmandu, transforming the capital into this massive, indignant demonstration. That initial group of Gen Z was now joined by parents, siblings, neighbors, all united by this profound sense of injustice.
So the government must have been scrambling.
Absolutely caught off guard by the intensity of the backlash. They responded with desperate measures to try and regain control. For instance, imposing a curfew at 3:30 p.m., just hours after the shooting.
A curfew. Did that work?
Completely ineffective, utterly failed. The protests didn't just continue, they grew in size and ferocity. The outrage was so profound, so widespread, that the movement quickly spilled beyond Kathmandu.
It spread.
Oh, yes. It ignited similar, equally fervent demonstrations in other major cities, Pokhara, Budwal, Ferozpur, Damak, all over the country.
So this wasn't just a Kathmandu issue anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah.
This geographic spread is really significant. It demonstrates that the anger wasn't isolated to the capital or a particular group. It reflected a deep, nationwide public outrage that could no longer be contained.
And the curfew.
The curfew, rather than instilling order, just became another symbol of government overreach. Its failure highlighted a crucial insight, really. When a government loses the trust and consent of its people, its attempts at control often backfire dramatically. They lead to even greater defiance, widespread unrest.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to that immediate trigger, the one that much of the global media initially focused on, the social media ban. And yes, as you said, it was a significant factor, a flashpoint that definitely pushed many over the edge, no doubt about that.
A definite catalyst.
But to truly understand the depth of this revolt, we need to unpack this further, understand its true place within that broader context of grievances, recognize it as a symptom, perhaps, not the underlying disease.
Exactly. And it's important to provide some chronological context here because the government's actions regarding social media weren't entirely sudden or arbitrary, even if they felt that way to many.
Right, there was a lead-up.
There was. Back in November 2023, the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology issued a mandate. It required social media companies to register locally in Nepal and, crucially, establish a physical presence, like an office, within the country.
Okay, and what was their rationale for that?
The government's stated justification, their official line, was to combat things like hate speech, fake news, online fraud, other cybercrimes. They argued it was a necessary step for public safety, digital regulation, bringing Nepal in line with what they claimed were international best practices.
But what's really striking, and perhaps telling, is the lack of compliance from most of these big tech giants, right?
That's right. Despite 5 public notices issued by the Nepali government signaling increasing urgency, most major social media platforms simply ignored the directive, whether it was deliberate or logistical, or they didn't take it seriously. They just didn't comply.
Which created a standoff.
Precisely. And interestingly, only one significant platform actually registered and complied with the new rules, the massively popular Chinese app, TikTok.
TikTok complied, but Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp didn't.
Correct. Which, raised some eyebrows at the time.
I bet. So the government had the legal power to ban them.
They did.
Yeah.
That added another layer of complexity. Nepal's Supreme Court had previously permitted the government to ban unregistered platforms. So, after these repeated warnings went unheeded, the government issued a final warning on August 28th, setting a September 3rd deadline for registration.
And when that passed?
When that deadline passed without further compliance, 26 social media platforms were banned. Just like that. A sweeping action.
26, including the big ones.
Oh, yes, including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter, essentially almost every major Western social media platform that Nepal has used daily for communication, commerce, news, everything.
But TikTok remained.
TikTok remained accessible, having complied. The government intended this, or said they intended this, as a regulatory move, but it was perceived very, very differently by the public.
How so? What was the protesters' perspective?
From their perspective, this ban was far more sinister than just a simple regulatory measure or a fight against cybercrime. They saw it very clearly, not as a way to combat misinformation or fraud, but as a direct authoritarian attempt by the government to establish control over the social media platforms.
Control.
Yes, and specifically to suppress the dissent among people. We heard protesters stating directly, passionately, that it was extremely against our freedom of speech. Some compared it to a dictator's control, like the restrictive policies you see in non-democratic regimes.
So it tapped into a deeper fear.
Absolutely. A fear about creeping authoritarianism, a fundamental erosion of democratic rights.
And was that perception just paranoia, or was there something feeding it?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. It's a critical piece of the puzzle. The public perception wasn't unfounded. It wasn't a mere conspiracy theory. For months leading up to the ban, many videos exposing government corruption and blatant nepotism had been going viral on social media.
Okay. What kind of videos?
Videos often highlighting the lavish lifestyles of ministers' children, their relatives, the so-called Nepo kids, shining a harsh light on their ostentatious displays of wealth, luxury cars, designer clothes, exotic trips.
Well, most people were struggling.
Exactly. in stark contrast to the everyday struggles of ordinary Nepalese. So, for the public, the social media ban wasn't some abstract regulatory action. It was seen, very clearly, as a transparent attempt by the government to silence this critical content, control the narrative, and prevent further exposure of inconvenient truths.
Wow, so the ban almost backfired by confirming people's suspicions.
In many ways, yes, it's a powerful insight. Attempts at information control by a government can often inadvertently highlight perceived transparency issues and fuel public distrust, especially when the information being suppressed points directly to corruption or inequality.
And this deep-seated distrust, ignited by the ban, only worsened an already simmering resentment, didn't it? Rooted in the crushing reality of economic hardship, especially for Nepal's youth.
Precisely. Let's pivot to that now, because it's a deeper, more pervasive problem. One that truly fueled the youth's fury and lay at the very core of their frustrations: Nepal's dire economic situation.
We're talking high unemployment.
Staggering youth unemployment. In 2024, the youth unemployment rate in Nepal stood at a shocking 20.82%.
20%.
20.82%. Think about that for a moment. That's literally 1 out of every 5 young people without a job, fresh out of school or college, facing a brick wall of unfulfilled aspirations.
That's not just a statistic, is it? That's personal struggle dash hopes.
It's a pervasive sense of hopelessness that really corrodes the fabric of society.
So what are the consequences? Where do they go? What do they do?
Well, this is where the story gets incredibly grim, and it sheds light on the sheer desperation gripping the youth. With very few new jobs being created within Nepal, and the existing opportunities often being insufficient or, frankly, unfairly distributed.
Right, nepotism again, maybe.
That perception is definitely there. Many young people are left with no choice but to seek opportunities abroad. And the lengths to which some Nepalis are driven for income are truly shocking. It illustrates the gravity of the situation, the immense pressure they face.
How shocking.
Consider this. Thousands of people, the source mentioned over 15,000 by February 2024, actually joined the Russian military to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war.
15,000 Nepalese fighting for Russia and Ukraine.
Yes. It's not a casual decision. It's a profound, life-altering gamble.
And were they properly trained? Were they safe?
Reports suggest not. Many with little or no prior military experience were reportedly sent directly to the front lines after only a few weeks of hurried instruction. The risk was immense.
And the human cost.
Tragically, this has resulted in many Nepali lives being lost. In a conflict far from their homes, fighting for a foreign power. It's a stark, heartbreaking human cost.
Why? Why take such an enormous risk?
Analyzing their motivation, it seems clear. Despite the looming danger of death on a foreign battlefield, they go because of the severe systemic lack of job opportunities at home.
It's purely economic desperation.
Largely, yes. Russia entices them with lucrative offers. Some fighters reported earning about $4,000 a month.
$4,000.
A month, which is, what, a bit more than 500,000 Nepali rupees? For context, that is a truly significant sum compared to what's available to them in Nepal, where the average monthly income might be a tiny fraction of that.
So it highlights this stark contrast.
A stark contrast between the government's perceived inaction in creating a viable domestic economy and its citizens' desperate measures to find income abroad. It highlights a profound failure of governance, and it creates this deep wellspring of resentment.
It's a powerful insight, isn't it? When economic despair reaches that critical level, it can push citizens to make unimaginable sacrifices, take extreme risks.
It exposes a fundamental failure of the state to provide basic economic security and opportunity for its own people. It leads to this catastrophic brain drain, a loss of invaluable human capital, and fuels immense anger.
Now, connect that profound economic hardship, that palpable desperation we just talked about, with the perceived indifference, maybe even callousness of the ruling class.
Yeah, the disconnect is jarring.
You'd think, given the dire circumstances, the sacrifices being made by ordinary Nepalese, that the politicians would maybe demonstrate a bit of empathy, perhaps work diligently to address the crisis. Had they been a bit more responsive, perhaps the situation wouldn't have gotten this bad.
One would hope so.
But instead, the source says they did the exact opposite, actively exacerbating the public's fury through their actions and lifestyles.
And what's truly infuriating here, reading between the lines, is the glaring, almost cynical irony. While thousands of young Nepalese were risking their lives abroad or struggling with unemployment and poverty at home, the Nepali politicians' sons started showing off their luxurious lifestyles.
Showing off.
The source details this. It describes how children and grandchildren of these politicians can be seen flaunting easy and lavish lifestyles in photos, foreign trips, collection of expensive goods, luxury cars, designer clothes.
And this was visible, public.
Often posted publicly, yes. Audacious, seemingly tone-deaf to the suffering all around them. It was a direct slap in the face to a struggling populace, a stark illustration of a ruling elite completely disconnected from the realities faced by the majority.
And this stark contrast, this outrageous display of wealth amidst widespread poverty and desperation, it was amplified massively on social media, presumably.
Massively. As these images and videos circulated, they sparked widespread outrage. And it wasn't long before the hashtag #NepoKids began trending.
Nepokids.
Yeah. It became this powerful rallying cry against the perceived corruption, privilege, and entitlement of the political class and their families. It was more than just a hashtag. It became a potent symbol of deep-seated injustice.
And even after the government tried to silence dissent with the social media ban,
Nepali netizens found a way. They flooded TikTok, remember, the one major platform still accessible and wildly popular, with videos making a simple comparison.
comparing what?
Comparing the daily problems and struggles of the Nepali masses with the lavish lifestyle of the children of politicians. These videos weren't subtle. They explicitly showcased designer clothes, luxury cars, extravagant foreign trips, ostentatious parties, all set against this backdrop of national poverty and desperation.
So the ban didn't stop the message getting out.
If anything, it focused it onto the one remaining platform. Unsurprisingly, #NepoKids and #NepoBaby also trended heavily on TikTok, keeping the spotlight firmly on this hypocrisy and fueling the public's anger.
This whole Nepo Kids phenomenon, it's not just about individual acts of privilege, is it?
No, it's a powerful symbol. It transforms abstract economic disparity into deeply personal, visceral outrage. It demonstrates how the perception of injustice can be just as potent as the injustice itself in fueling social unrest. The anger was palpable, and you could feel it moving from online spaces into the streets.
And this profound outrage found its most poignant, maybe most powerful voice in the protests themselves. You mentioned a poster.
Yes, one particularly powerful and tragic protest poster, widely seen on September 8th, perfectly encapsulated this national despair, the chasm between the rulers and the ruled.
What did it say?
It starkly juxtaposed two devastating realities, it declared. Politicians' children bring Gucci bags from abroad alongside, and the children of the common people are brought in coffins.
Wow. Coffins.
Yeah.
A direct reference to the soldiers killed in Ukraine.
A direct, devastating reference to those Nepalists killed fighting in the Russia-Ukraine war, highlighting the ultimate sacrifice made by the poor and desperate while the privileged lived in unimaginable luxury. That single image, it really speaks volumes about the chasm, doesn't it?
It really does, a gut punch. But the social media ban, the economic desperation, the Nepo Kids backlash, they weren't operating in a vacuum, were they?
Not at all.
To truly grasp the intensity of this revolt, we need to look at the even deeper systemic political issues that have festered in Nepal for years, poisoning public trust, creating fertile ground for such an explosion.
Absolutely. The youth's frustration wasn't just about the current government. It was with the entrenched system itself.
Particularly with the same handful of 70-year-old politicians who seem to take turns to be in power like a rotation. Is that a fair assessment?
That's certainly the perception, and it breeds profound cynicism, this feeling of a stagnant, self-serving political elite, where power is just recycled among a few familiar faces. It creates a sense of hopelessness regarding any real change.
And what's truly provocative here, maybe deeply concerning, is a sentiment that emerged from the protests themselves. You mentioned something about the monarchy.
Yes, it's a sentiment that needs careful consideration. Many people said that Nepal's experiment of becoming a republic failed, and perhaps it should go back to be a monarchy again.
People were actually saying that. Go back to having a king.
That sentiment was definitely present in the discourse surrounding the protests. It isn't just casual complaining or simple dissatisfaction. It demonstrates a profound level of disillusionment with the current democratic setup.
Wow.
It's pushing some citizens to consider withdrawing from democracy entirely, reverting to a system that was overthrown with such effort and hope not that long ago. It's a very serious development when people start questioning the very foundation of their governance.
To understand the true weight and gravity of that statement, the republic failed, maybe we need a quick historical reminder.
A brief context is useful, yeah.
Nepal's political landscape has seen dramatic transformations. Before 2008, it was a monarchy, wasn't it? Ruled by a king.
That's right. The last one being King Jayendorda. For centuries, the king held ultimate authority, and this deeply ingrained structure defined Nepal's identity for generations. It was a very different political landscape, tradition-bound, and for many, lacking popular representation.
And that monarchy was eventually overthrown.
Yes, by two major movements that fundamentally reshaped Nepal and laid the groundwork for its modern democratic aspirations.
Which were?
Firstly, the Democracy Revolution of 2006, a powerful, largely nonviolent popular uprising that saw millions take to the streets demanding change.
Okay.
And secondly, the long-running Maoist insurgency, a decade-long armed rebellion that sought to dismantle the existing feudalistic structures and create a more equitable society. These diverse forces converged, driven by a shared desire for fundamental change.
And that led to the end of the monarchy.
Yes. On May 28, 2008, the monarchy was officially abolished, and Nepal transitioned to become a federal democratic republic.
And the feeling at the time, optimism.
Immense hope and optimism. There was this powerful belief, as one quote from the Time put it, "We believe that all of us will work hard together to make the dream of new Nepal come true." It's supposed to be a new chapter, a fresh start promising stability, prosperity, genuine representation for all.
But let's do a reality check on that powerful dream versus the subsequent reality. It's now been, what, 17 years since that momentous transition to democracy?
17 years, yes.
And in those 17 years, Nepal's government has changed how many times?
A staggering 13 times.
13 government changes in 17 years.
Yes. Think about that instability. That's a new government, on average, almost every year and a half. This constant churning of leadership makes long-term policymaking virtually impossible. It erodes international confidence, and it leaves the populace constantly feeling adrift, unrepresented.
Who's been in charge during this period?
Exactly. What we've witnessed is that the power kept rotating among a very few key figures, names that kept reappearing. KP Sharma Oli, Pushpa Kamal Dahal, Sher Bahadur Doba.
The heads of the major parties.
Primarily, yes. Representing the dominant political forces, the Nepali Congress and the Nepali Communists, specifically the CPN-UML and the CPN Mao Center, which emerged from the insurgency.
And they just swap partners, form coalitions.
They constantly form and break coalitions, often with smaller parties. These are frequently marriages of convenience rather than deep ideological alignment. It leads to these frequent shifts in power, driven by short-term political gains rather than long-term national policy or the public interest.
So it's like political musical chairs.
That's a good way to put it. This instability, this constant musical chairs of leadership, prevents long-term vision, consistent governance, and any meaningful progress on critical issues like economic development or corruption. The effect is just deep fatigue among the electorate.
So what does this constant political instability and power sharing among a few familiar faces mean for the current situation? Does it connect to the anger?
It absolutely connects.
Yeah.
It means that the heads of all three major parties, the very people who've been at the center of this power rotation, ostensibly leading the nation, have been accused of deep-seated corruption.
All three. Seriously.
Accusations against the leadership of all three major players. This just further erodes public trust, leaving citizens wondering if their leaders are serving themselves or the country.
And how can a democratic system function, really, when its most powerful leaders are so widely perceived as corrupt? Are there specific examples?
There are. And the source material paints a sobering picture.
Yeah.
Let's look at them. Sher Bahadur Doba, head of the Nepali Congress, former PM multiple times, accused of taking an illegal commission for aircraft purchases. Diverting funds.
Okay.
His wife, Arzurana Doba, who is the foreign affairs minister, she faces particularly egregious accusations. Using fake documents to present Nepali citizens as Bhutanese nationals, allegedly facilitating their resettlement in America as refugees, profiting from vulnerable people.
That's shocking. Who else?
Pushpa Kamal Dahal, head of the CPN Maoist Center, three-time PM, accused of diverting vast sums of money originally meant for Maoist guerrilla fighters, stealing billions of rupees intended for those who fought for the very changes that brought him to power.
Wow. The irony.
And even the most recent Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, head of the CPN-UML, under investigation in a corruption case for violating a Supreme Court order, allegedly trying to convert a public tea estate into a commercial plot for private gain.
It seems pervasive.
It doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
The source also mentions that 3 other former prime ministers are accused of selling government land to private individuals, systematically enriching themselves at the expense of public assets. These aren't isolated incidents. It paints a consistent picture of high-level corruption woven into the political system.
And here's where we hit a critical systemic flaw, isn't there? A legal loophole that just entrenches this corruption even further, makes accountability almost impossible.
Yes, this is a truly crucial point, a foundational crack in Nepal's democratic facade.
What is it?
It's been a practice apparently since 2006, enshrined somehow in the legal framework that no investigation can be carried out against a politician for any policy decision they make.
Policy decision, that sounds broad.
It's incredibly broad. It essentially grants corrupt politicians immunity for their actions, irrespective of how damaging or self-serving those actions might be to the nation.
So they can make decisions that benefit themselves or their cronies, call it policy, and be immune.
That's the loophole being exploited. This practice, maybe stemming from transitional provisions designed to ease the shift from monarchy, has been twisted to the point where it creates a system with almost no accountability for those in power.
And the consequence?
Tragically predictable.
Well,
It leads to even more corruption, because there's no real mechanism for redress, no fear of consequences. This legal loophole creates a system where the very people meant to serve the public are shielded from scrutiny. It deepens the frustration, the feeling of powerlessness among citizens.
so it's not just about individual greed.
No, it's a stark illustration of how institutionalized impunity can dismantle public trust and fundamentally challenge the legitimacy of an entire political system. It makes corruption feel like not an anomaly, but a feature.
Okay, let's try and bring all these deeply interwoven threads together now. We need to weave a complete picture of this volatile situation that led directly to the September Revolt.
Yeah, connecting the dots.
Imagine, if you will, being a young Nepali citizen. You're amidst this profound economic inequality. You're facing rampant youth unemployment. You're witnessing widespread corruption almost daily. And you're constantly subjected to blatant nepotism by your leaders, flaunted online.
It's a recipe for frustration.
Then, on top of all that, your government imposes a sweeping ban on social media, the very platform where your generation finds its voice, exposes injustice, connects with the world, maybe even earns a living.
The one outlet they felt they had.
It's clear, isn't it, that the anger and frustration among the people had already reached a critical tipping point, a pressure cooker on the verge of just bursting.
Absolutely. The pressure was immense.
And after this ban, it didn't just bubble, it exploded completely, with a force and fury that perhaps few could have anticipated.
Yeah, the scale took many by surprise.
So the social media ban wasn't the sole cause, we agree on that. But it was undeniably the spark, wasn't it? The spark that ignited a powder keg that had been meticulously packed over years of misgovernance and broken promises.
A perfect storm of grievances, with the ban as the final trigger. And what's also critical to understand here is the immediate, tangible economic impact of that ban. It went far beyond just abstract freedom of speech concerns for many Nepalese.
How so? What were the economic impacts?
Well, tourism, for one. Tourism plays a hugely significant role in Nepal's economy. It's one of its primary sources of foreign revenue, employment.
Right, Everest, trekking.
Exactly. Businesses, hotels, trekking guides, tour operators, they rely heavily on platforms like Facebook and Instagram for outreach, marketing, securing bookings from international travelers. The ban on these major platforms completely disrupted the tourism industry overnight.
Just cut off their main channel.
Cut off a vital lifeline for many. It led to cancellations, lost livelihoods. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an economic hammer blow for that sector.
Okay, that's significant. What else?
Additionally, millions of Nepali families were impacted in a deeply personal, emotional way. An estimated 7 million Nepali citizens live abroad for jobs, for studies.
7 million, that's a huge number.
It is. And these families, spread across continents, relied almost exclusively on free online messaging apps, WhatsApp, Messenger, Viber, to contact their loved ones, send updates, manage finances, just stay connected.
And the ban cut that off, too.
Severed those critical connections, adding yet another profound layer of stress, isolation, and frustration to an already desperate populace. This wasn't abstract policy. It was directly impacting daily life, mental well-being. And it absolutely further fueled this protest by making the government's actions feel personal and punitive.
So the economic pain, the personal disconnection, added to the political anger.
A potent mix.
And then when people finally took to the streets to protest, initially peacefully, as you said, and the Nepali government reacted how?
They reacted not like a democratic government committed to dialogue or public welfare, but frankly like an authoritarian one. Resorting to brutal force, they immediately moved to suppress dissent. Not letting people protest, as the source puts it, deploying a heavily armed police force. And as we discussed earlier, shockingly, shooting at the protesters with live bullets. This violent repression just served to pour gasoline on an already raging fire.
Did the government try to justify this? Defend the ban?
To defend its increasingly unpopular actions and the widely condemned social media ban, the government, through its Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, relied on a familiar tactic, often employed by governments under pressure: nationalism.
Blaming outsiders, waving the flag.
Something like that. He stated publicly that he would not bow down to arrogance or accept anything contrary to national interest, trying to frame the protesters' demands, even the international outcry, as an affront to Nepali sovereignty.
An attempt to rally support.
An attempt to rally the populace around a perceived external threat and deflect from the internal issues, framing dissent as unpatriotic. However, in the face of such widespread, deep-seated grievances, and especially after the horrific use of live ammunition against its own citizens, this rhetoric clearly failed to resonate.
People didn't buy it.
No. The enraged public saw it as a desperate deflection rather than a genuine appeal. The leadership's disconnect from the public mood became painfully evident.
But eventually, even with this hardline stance, attempts to invoke nationalism, the government had to give in to the protesters.
They did. The sheer force, the widespread nature, the escalating intensity of the uprising. It became simply too much to contain through brute force or rhetoric. The will of the people, once ignited, proved to be an unstoppable force in this instance.
How did the capitulation happen? Was it sudden?
It came not as a single decisive moment, but in stages. A series of concessions forced by the unrelenting pressure from the streets.
What was the first step?
First, in a move likely aimed at appeasing the public, taking some immediate pressure off, the Home Minister resigned on moral grounds. An attempt to offer a scapegoat, perhaps.
Did that work?
Not really. Then, crucially, the ban on social media apps was lifted, acknowledging the immense public outcry and the economic disruption it had caused.
So they reversed the ban. Was that enough?
No. These initial concessions were not enough. The protesters were far from appeased. They saw these actions as too little, too late. They recognized the underlying issues, the corruption, the unemployment, the lack of accountability remained unaddressed.
So the unrest continued, even escalated.
It continued to escalate dramatically.
Yeah.
Residences, the Prime Minister, the President, even the opposition leader were specifically targeted and set on fire.
Setting fire to their houses.
Yes, symbolizing a complete and utter breakdown of respect for authority and the political class as a whole.
Things must have been incredibly tense.
The situation became so volatile, so dangerous, that the army had to use helicopters to evacuate the ministers and officials from their homes and offices, a desperate measure highlighting the state's complete loss of control.
Evacuating ministers by helicopter.
And finally, under this immense, undeniable pressure, on September 9th, around 2 p.m., Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli officially resigned, just hours after those widespread attacks on government buildings and residences.
So the protests forced his resignation.
It marked a profound, albeit tragic, victory for the protesters, demonstrating the overwhelming power of a united and enraged populace when pushed to its absolute limits.
It's a crisis that offers a stark insight, doesn't it?
It really does. That authoritarian tactics in a democracy, especially when public trust is deeply eroded, can paradoxically fuel greater, more violent dissent, forcing concessions only after significant and often irreversible damage has been done to the social and political fabric. #outro.
As of the time we're having this deep dive, we want to make it clear that the protests in Nepal have, in fact, not died down. Is that right?
That's the situation as we understand it, yes. The immediate triggers may have been addressed. The ban lifted, the PM resigned, but the underlying anger hasn't dissipated.
And the demands have now morphed, shifted to something much broader, more fundamental.
Exactly. They're focused on systemic reforms. People aren't just asking for a specific policy change anymore. They're demanding fundamental changes to how their country is run, calling for an overhaul of the entire political system, tackling corruption, ensuring accountability.
It sounds like the country is still in a very fragile state.
Extremely fragile. This ongoing tension, the precariousness of the situation, it's evident in the fact that Nepal's army chief has had to address the nation directly, appealing for peace and urging calm.
The army chief appealing for peace. That's significant.
The necessity of such an address from the military leadership underscores that the underlying issues are far from resolved. The country remains deeply fragile, grappling with the immediate aftermath and this complex, uncertain path forward. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that removing a leader doesn't automatically heal the deep wounds of a nation.
No, it doesn't. What Nepal's situation offers us, then looking from the outside, is maybe a profound and live example of what happens when those in power try to suppress the voices of the people completely.
It's a textbook case, almost.
It's a stark, real-world illustration of the devastating consequences when real pressing issues, pervasive corruption, widespread unemployment, blatant nepotism are just ignored or, worse, actively perpetuated by those in charge year after year.
Yeah. It's a testament to the fact that you can't indefinitely silence the cries of a suffering populace. Eventually, something has to give.
And this truly is a powerful lesson, isn't it, to all governments everywhere.
It absolutely should be. They shouldn't ignore the needs of their people to such an extent that things get this bad. There's a critical point where frustration boils over, where that social contract is irrevocably broken.
And once it breaks,
And if things do get this bad, it gets really incredibly difficult to reestablish law and order, let alone trust in the country. The damage to the national psyche, to institutions, it can take generations to repair.
and here's a critical, often dangerous concern that emerges from such profound turmoil, isn't it? We see reports that some anti-democracy groups are unfortunately using these widespread protests and the resulting instability.
Using it as an opportunity.
Exactly, an opportunity to talk about bringing back the monarchy. Does that surprise you?
It's not entirely surprising, sadly. It points to the inherent fragility of democratic institutions, especially relatively young ones, when public trust is so severely eroded. When people feel their current system has failed them so badly, some might look for alternatives, even ones that seem like a step backward.
But reverting to a monarchy? That would be.
Profoundly misguided, in my view. While the current democratic system in Nepal has undeniably failed to deliver on its promises for many, leading to understandable disillusionment, the solution should always be found within a democratic setup, not by abandoning it.
No.
Reverting to a monarchy would mean abandoning the hard-won gains of the past, suppressing the very principles of popular representation that people fought for, and risking a return to a less accountable form of governance. That doesn't solve the underlying problems of corruption or lack of opportunity.
So the hope is?
We can only hope that Nepal can find a peaceful and long-term solution. One that addresses these deep-seated grievances, truly cleans up its political landscape, and actually strengthens its democratic framework for all its citizens, making it more responsive and accountable.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to offer you, our listener, a final thought to ponder. One that builds on Nepal's tumultuous experience. Considering Nepal's difficult journey from monarchy to a struggling republic and the profound, deep-seated issues we've discussed, from economic desperation to systemic corruption that fueled this Gen Z revolt and brought the nation to its knees, what do you believe are the essential ingredients for a democracy to truly deliver for its people?
That's the core question, isn't it?
What are the mechanisms, the responsibilities, the fundamental commitments required from leadership and citizens alike that prevent such a tipping point? Prevent anger boiling over into such dramatic and often tragic outcomes. It's a question about the very foundations of good governance, equitable economic opportunity, and genuinely responsive leadership in maintaining stability and trust in any democratic system. We leave that thought with you to reflect on.